but they need partners. And those partners have to be those organizations and leaders at grassroots and organized leaders among the elite who have been doing this for quite some time.
Doc, you know, we go back and forth, and I've heard a lot of people, and I know, and you and I have talked about this, with the people that say, well, they need to stop protesting and doing because protest doesn't work. But I don't think people realize that protest does work for the simple fact that there's a lot of legislation that have been enacted that was a direct reflection of because of the protests. And the Justice Department said the greatest singular legislation ever enacted was the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which was brought out by a protest on the march from Selma to Montgomery for voting rights because they were being disenfranchised.
You're dropping more science than Einstein on here, brother. There's no question. And look, somebody tell Bruce Arians, love you. Glad you got my man Tom Brady, the GOAT. So don't be messing with my man, the GOAT down there. Just get him right now. Get him some receivers. You got them, right? Don't do the Aaron Rodgers where you just jack him up, hire Jordan Love, ain't got no weapons, all right? So let me just get my bid in for my man Tom Brady. But Bruce, where you at, Bruce? Just because you had an experience as a white guy in 1968 where you saw some protests and it didn't turn out that way, then give up your white privilege, Bruce. Then give up your white privilege, Bruce. If it doesn't work, what are you willing to do for it, Bruce? Don't blame the people that you think are ineffectively protesting. Surrender your white privilege. And by surrendering your white privilege, put in place a black head coach right now, Bruce. Forget protests. Be substantive. Now, we know he ain't going to do it. And I ain't mad at you, Bruce. I'm just being rhetorical. But I'm saying slow down with what you're saying. It's sloppy. It's imprecise. Protest is huge. There was a protest in 1776. I don't know if y'all heard about it.
Yeah.
But they were mad at some people, and they threw some tea into the river.
In the harbor.
And then they protested. And the protest led to a nation. My God. They were protesting the unjust treatment by the British. And now America was born. You claim, Bruce, I think, that it's the greatest nation in the world. Protest birthed it, sir. That's like saying, I'm proud to be the son of my mama, but we don't need mamas. We don't need mothers in order to be born. We just need test tubes. Come on, sir, stop. The reality is protest, as you said, has led to tremendous results. Martin Luther King Jr., 1963, along with tremendous Fred Shuttlesworth, Diane Nash, James Bevel, fighting. What happened? 1964, the Civil Rights Act. As you said, 1965, John Lewis and many others involved, Amelia Pointer, right? When you think about the fact that the Civil Rights Bill passed in 64, the Voting Rights in 1965, the Fair Housing Act in 1968, protest is incredibly important. It's strategic. It's directed. How do we know it's important? How do we know it's effective? You got mad at Colin Kaepernick for protesting. 4 years later, more of your football players understand what he was trying to do then than understood it, now than understood it then, and they are a result of what he did. So, Mr. Arians and others who say protests ain't important, you just mad because it is important. It's so important that a young 17-year-old boy in Kenosha shot 2 protesters and murdered them in cold blood, because protest is extremely important, extremely impactful, and has consequences that continue to reverberate. So for those who say that, I just say pick up a book, study your history, and know what you're talking about.
Doc, can I ask you a question? We put people in office. That's what the politicians are for. That's what Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and Marco Rubio, Lindsey Graham, Tim Scott, that's what they're there for. And then we have the local level. Why do we demand, why do we ask so much from our athletes that our politicians who say they take an oath and say this is what we're about, this is what we want to do, but we seem to get more and ask more from our athletes than we do our politicians?
Now, this is where Bruce Arians may be relevant. Remove one P word, protest, and put politicians in there. I ain't saying they ain't doing their job, but some of them ain't doing their job, or they're doing it effectively in the wrong direction. The reality is that the reason it falls upon us, because nobody will fight for you as much as you will. Shannon, when it comes time for you to renegotiate your contract, Skip loves you, Jenny loves you, but you got to speak for yourself. And if you don't speak up for yourself, you're not going to get the kind of contract you know you need and deserve. So the reality is that we can't depend on politicians. In fact, protests led to politicians. Without the protests, the politicians wouldn't exist. Many of them wouldn't even be in office. So we realize that, yes, Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, Tim Scott, Marco Rubio, and all these other figures should be doing what they're doing. And it is their responsibility. But it's our responsibility to hold their feet to the fire. It's our responsibility to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do. And we can never reduce the complexity of what we need, the nuance of what we need, to a political office. Politicians cannot ultimately deliver a change of mind, of soul, of heart, that is critical to fighting anti-blackness, that is critical to fomenting anti-racism in America. Now, Martin Luther King Jr. said, the law can't make you love me, but it can stop you from lynching me. So I'm not saying the law is not critical. I'm not saying the law is not important, but at the end of the day, nobody will fight for us. When we see LeBron James and Troy Vincent and Candace Parker and Miss Ogunagi and so many others who are out there representing those WNBA players, black women always leading the way, ain't they? Got gunshots on they backs. I know it's their backs. On they backs with the exact spaces where Mr. Blake was shot and his name spelled out on their shirts and pushing for legislation. This is what is critical. We can never depend upon politicians to represent our interests, but we have to appeal to them to make certain that they continue to articulate the noble aspirations for which we hired them in the first place.
So, Doc, sum this up for us. Speaking of all the protests, all that we saw in the wake of the George Floyd murder in Minneapolis, all the black people and the white people who turned out to protest, do you sense that we experienced any racial progress in this country to this point?
That's a great question. And look at it in précis. Look at it in short form. We said about George Floyd, oh my God, things are different. This is a new day. And I don't doubt that, because I think in many ways it is truly the case. We didn't have news people from all over the world when Eric Garner died to the same degree. And he died from the same malady. I can't breathe. A cop choking his airways, asphyxiating him. And then now we get the predictable posthumous demonization of Mr. Floyd. He had enough fentanyl in his body. I don't care what he had in his body, methamphetamine or fentanyl. It didn't kill him. He was still breathing when you came. The homicide was the direct result of Mr. Chauvin, former cop Chauvin, putting his knee on his neck, right? So the reality is that, yes, it is extremely important for us to talk about, the issues at play here. But when we speak about who is responsible ultimately and who is culpable, then we've got to speak about the issues that are before us. And yes, there was a tremendous change with George Floyd. But look at what happened. Not what was that, May 25th? And we're in August? And then another black man is killed? And then shot in the back? And then this is what you think. Do you cops even have common sense? Somebody's watching you. You're going to be put on camera. You probably will get fired, but this is what they know. It doesn't make a difference. I have qualified immunity. The people who are the prosecutors most likely will not hold me accountable. And I will literally get away with murder. The difference now is that we are not taking it lying down like Mr. Floyd, literally. He took it, they thought by Mr. Floyd being prostrate on the ground that we're going to take it lying down. No, we won't. We will rise up. And as you said, Latinx people, white brothers and sisters, putting their bodies on the line. The two protesters who were killed the other night were white.
Yep.
Right? Mr. Viola Luito in 1965 from Detroit, Michigan, who was leaving the march, murdered by racist bigots. Heather Heyer in Charlottesville, white woman on the front line. This is what allyship looks like. When black bodies are not the only bodies